President Trump signed sweeping tariffs on goods imported from Mexico, Canada, and China, some as high as 25%. And they're likely to have a major impact on what you pay.
This morning, government data shows egg prices have declined for the first time since October. The average price for a dozen grade A eggs fell to $5.12 in April.
With egg prices sitting at record highs, some people are going with another option, buying their own chickens to bring breakfast to the backyard.
Hidden beneath the ordinary lies a story of power, chaos, and survival. Today, it's not oil, it's not gold, it's eggs. Yes, eggs. And more than 172 million dozen of them have just been rejected from America's supply chain. At the center of this storm, Donald Trump, furious at what he calls the biggest food scandal in modern U.S. history. And standing against him is a man few expected. Carney, the quiet player suddenly holding the future of American food in his hands. If you think this is just about breakfast, think again. Because what's happening with America's eggs could reshape your grocery bill, your dinner table, and even the nation's politics. And unless you understand what's coming, you could be blindsided. For over a century, the egg has been one of America's most reliable food. Affordable, versatile, and packed with protein, it has fed soldiers in war, families in crisis, and entire industries, from bakeries to pharmaceuticals. In the early 20th century, eggs were produced mostly on family farms. By the 1950s, industrial farming changed everything. Chickens moved from open yards into massive facilities that could produce millions of eggs every week. This was the modern American miracle of abundance, cheap, steady food that gave families security. By the 1980s, eggs weren't just a breakfast food. They were a symbol of national stability. When politicians talked about the American kitchen, eggs were part of the picture. From Ronald Reagan joking about inflation at the grocery store, to Bill Clinton praising American farmers, eggs always represented the power of U.S. agriculture. But history also shows how fragile this system is. During World War II, rationing cut egg supplies drastically. Families learned to stretch every meal. In 2015, a deadly avian flu wiped out 50 million birds, cutting egg supply overnight and causing prices to spike to historic highs. And more recently, in 2022 to 2023, inflation and another avian flu outbreak pushed egg prices so high that memes flooded the internet, joking that eggs had become the new luxury item. Each time, Americans were reminded of a painful truth: food security is never guaranteed. So when officials announced that 172 million dozen eggs, that's more than 2 billion eggs, were being rejected from the national supply, it triggered shockwaves far beyond farms and factories. This wasn't just food being wasted, this was a direct hit to one of the foundations of American life. The crisis started quietly. Reports trickled in that massive shipments of eggs were being halted by federal inspectors. At first, it looked like routine safety checks, but soon the numbers exploded. Dozens of farms, hundreds of shipments, and eventually a staggering 172 million dozen eggs declared unfit. Donald Trump saw an opening. At rallies, he lit into regulators with his trademark fire. "This is the biggest scam ever pulled on the American people," he thundered. "They want you to pay $10 for a carton of eggs while they destroy perfectly good food." For Trump's supporters, it was proof of corruption, proof that elites were manipulating supply to punish ordinary Americans. But then came Carney. A quiet figure in Washington, Carney had rarely made headlines. Yet in front of Congress and the American public, he dropped a bombshell. These eggs do not meet U.S. safety standards. Approving them would put families at risk of salmonella outbreaks and contaminated food supplies. This is not politics. This is public safety. The room went silent. Carney framed the rejection as a matter of survival, not sabotage. But Trump framed it as theft from the American people. And suddenly, eggs, something most people never thought twice about, became the center of a national firestorm. To understand the scale of this crisis, you have to see how it hits different corners of society. Across the Midwest, poultry farmers are furious. Many invested heavily in expanding production after demand rose in 2022. Now, with shipments rejected, their barns are full of eggs that can't be sold. Feed costs keep climbing. Labor still needs to be paid, but income has vanished. One Iowa farmer put it simply, "If Washington doesn't take these eggs, I lose my farm. My grandfather built it, my father kept it alive, and I'll be the one to shut it down." At grocery stores, families are seeing prices climb again. A carton that had dropped to $3 is suddenly $5, $6, or even more in some regions. For middle-class households, it's annoying. For struggling families, it's devastating. A single mother in Ohio explained, "Eggs are the cheapest protein I can buy. If I can't afford them, what am I supposed to feed my kids?" On Capitol Hill, the crisis is pure theater. Trump and his allies paint Carney as part of a deep state plot to wreck farmers and families. Carney, backed by public health officials, insists the science is clear. Contaminated eggs can't be allowed in. Other politicians walk a tightrope, knowing that food crises can topple careers as quickly as economic ones. Fast food chains like McDonald's and Dunkin' are panicking. Breakfast menus depend on millions of eggs every week. Without supply, they face shortages, shrinking profits, and even layoffs. Behind closed doors, executives lobby Washington, demanding either a compromise or emergency imports. Truck drivers, warehouse staff, and egg processing plant employees feel the pain immediately. Without eggs moving through the system, shifts are cut, hours are lost, and families miss paychecks. For them, the Washington debate feels like a cruel game, while their livelihoods hang in the balance. On social media, the crisis explodes. Memes about golden eggs return. Conspiracy theories swirl. Some claim foreign competitors bribed regulators. Others say big corporations want to push lab-grown alternatives. In the fog of confusion, trust erodes. Each group has a stake. Each group tells a different story. But the core conflict remains. Was rejecting these eggs a necessary act of safety or a catastrophic act of sabotage? The egg crisis may look like an American domestic issue, but its impact spills far beyond U.S. borders. Consider this. America is not only one of the largest producers of eggs, but also a key exporter. Countries like Mexico, Canada, and several nations in Asia depend on U.S. shipments to stabilize their own markets. When Washington rejects 172 million dozen eggs, it's not just American shelves that feel the crunch. It's supermarket aisles from Toronto to Tokyo. In Mexico, where eggs are a cornerstone of daily meals, supply disruptions spark immediate concern. Officials fear price spikes that could fuel public anger. In Europe, where avian flu already crippled poultry supplies in 2022, the rejection of American eggs deepens shortages. And then there's Brazil. With America sidelining its own production, Brazil, already the world's third largest egg exporter, sees opportunity. Their agricultural lobbies move swiftly, offering buyers deals that undercut U.S. suppliers. Overnight, what looks like a food safety decision begins to reshape the global balance of trade. But economics is just one side. The geopolitical stakes are far darker. When a nation can't guarantee basic food staples, it loses leverage on the world stage. America has long prided itself on feeding the world. If that reputation cracks, rival powers step in. China, for instance, quietly monitors the crisis. Already investing heavily in synthetic proteins and alternative food systems, Beijing sees an opening to position itself as a future leader in global food stability. What America loses in credibility, China could gain in influence. Food is never just food. It's diplomacy, leverage, and survival. Which leaves us with a haunting question. Is this crisis merely about eggs, or is it about America losing one of its last great symbols of abundance? The deeper we look, the stranger this story becomes. Why now? Why reject such an enormous volume of eggs all at once? Carney insists it's purely science. Tests revealed unacceptable contamination risks. Trump insists it's sabotage, an intentional squeeze on farmers and families. But insiders whisper about something bigger. Some point to corporate lobbying, suggesting that powerful investors in lab-grown or plant-based alternatives want to accelerate their rise. Others hint at international pressure, foreign trade disputes that quietly spill into America's domestic food system. And then there's timing. The rejection comes just months before another election cycle. Food crises historically have been political earthquakes. From bread riots in 18th century France to meat shortages in the 1970s. America, nothing destabilizes leaders faster than empty grocery shelves. Which begs the question, is this really about protecting American families, or is someone, somewhere, using food as a weapon? The road ahead offers three chillingly different futures. The most optimistic outcome sees farmers, regulators, and industry leaders finding common ground. Perhaps stricter safety checks are implemented, farmers receive compensation for their losses, and new oversight systems prevent such mass rejections from happening again. In this case, prices stabilize, trust is slowly restored, and America emerges scarred but stronger. Families would look back on this as a bizarre but temporary storm. But if compromise fails, the crisis could spiral. Imagine shelves stripped bare, grocery stores rationing cartons, and desperate consumers turning to gray markets where eggs are sold at triple their official price. Farmers go bankrupt, fast food chains shrink menus, and unemployment rises in agriculture-dependent regions. In this world, the egg becomes more than food. It becomes a symbol of government failure, and Trump's fiery warnings of sabotage begin to sound to many like prophecy fulfilled. Out of crisis often comes innovation. Already, startups are racing to produce lab-grown egg proteins and plant-based alternatives that can replicate everything from scrambled eggs to baked goods. If Americans lose trust in traditional farming, these alternatives could explode in popularity, fundamentally reshaping what an egg even means. Just as oat milk rose from niche to mainstream during a dairy crisis, synthetic eggs could seize their moment. The question is not whether one of these futures will unfold, it's which one and how quickly. And this leaves a final chilling thought. If egg, the simplest and most ordinary food, can collapse into crisis, what does that mean for everything else? What happens when the same logic applies to meat, milk, or even clean water? As the dust settles, one truth becomes clear. America's egg crisis is not about breakfast. It is about power, trust, and the invisible systems that keep society running. Donald Trump calls it sabotage. Carney calls it science. Farmers call it betrayal. And families call it unbearable. But behind all these voices is a deeper reality. When food supply cracks, the illusion of stability collapses with it. History teaches us that societies rise and fall not just on armies or economies, but on whether their people can eat. Today, it's eggs. Tomorrow, it could be something far more vital. So the question is not whether we care about this crisis. The real question is, when the most ordinary food becomes a battlefield, who can we truly trust to protect us?